Okay, great afternoon to everybody. This is Marvin Glenn. I'm your host of Digesting Black History 365 podcast. And you guys could be anywhere right now, but you're here with me. And you're here with my guest. His name is Sylvester Brown Jr. And we're going to bring him on and let him talk about himself and things that he's done. But I really want you guys to really get your notebooks out because for young writers, this is the perfect person to be on here to talking about these things that will help you guys and enlighten you guys about writing, as well as being a community leader, because he's done so much graciously in his life. So all I want to do is get you guys to come on in, take a seat, get your coffee, get you some tea, get you a little sandwich, and enjoy, a little bit of time with us out of your Sunday. So anyway, once again, this is Digesting Black History 365 podcast, where your history is our history, and this is the world's history, Black history. So all I'm trying to do is just be a small part in educating and giving you guys an understanding of what it really means. See, I know to be Black, but to respect your history as being a Black man, Black woman, Black child. So once again, we're going to get into the podcast right now. We want to graciously welcome Sylvester Brown Jr. to the podcast. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, Glenn. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure, my privilege, my honor. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing well as at myself because I'm truly saying I'm almost getting a little nervous because like all the years I used to pick up this one magazine, and I'm gonna let you talk about that. But I used to grab this magazine so graciously, man, and be like, one day I'm gonna meet him. And then the first time I met you, because I started off doing photography, still am a photographer. But when I started off doing it, I saw you and it was just so quick because you were busy doing something. I think you was interviewing somebody.
Okay.
And it might have been at the Black Expo. That's where I started. I started doing stuff down there. When I saw you for the first time, I think I was either busy doing something, you were busy because we saw each other real quick.
Right.
And I ran over and made sure I shook your hand.
Okay.
And then after that, I just kind of left and went on doing what I was doing. But it was really a pleasure getting a chance to meet you, especially somebody in our community that was doing something positive as what you were doing. But could you give us a backstory on yourself, minutes of that?
It's been an interesting journey. And I'll start it, at the beginning. And feel free to jump in. I am one of 11 children. My mother came from the Missouri Boot Heel. My father was from Arkansas. Somehow my father got my mother pregnant. No, I'm sorry. My mother got pregnant by another guy. She came to St. Louis to find him, found out that he was a player, had a lot of women, and but she stayed here for a while. And then my father, who was driving trucks, met her, took her back to this town, Lilburn, where she was born in the Missouri Boot Heel, and asked for her hand in marriage and brought her back to St. Louis. My mother wanted to have her baby at a real hospital because in Lilburn, they had substandard hospitals. So she wanted to come here and have her baby in St. Louis, which is my older sister, which wasn't my father's daughter. So anyway, my father was a chronic alcoholic. I mean, alcoholism ruined his life. Alcoholism, gambling. So he was in and out of my entire life. My mother was a soldier, and she really was my inspiration, my mentor, my teacher, who to this day I rely on to reinforce the idea that no matter what situation you're in, you can get through it. You just have to be strong, tenacious, creative, and you can get through it. So anyway, I was born in the Ville area. My consciousness was formed by the age, my memory was formed by the age of 9 or 10 when we moved into the Pruitt-Igoe housing projects. That to me was an upgrade. For those who don't know, the Pruitt-Igoe housing project was 33 concrete buildings that was built in downtown St. Louis, Cass and Jefferson area, where they're now building the NGA site. Anyway, they built Pruitt-Igoe because they wanted to they wanted to continue downtown development. So they destroyed Mill Creek, which was one of the city's Black areas of town, which is downtown. So it's 20,000 Blacks, 800 businesses. So they built Pruitt-Igoe. They destroyed Mill Creek. They moved Black folks into Pruitt-Igoe and other housing projects in other parts of the city. So anyway, Pruitt-Igoe was a vast difference from the life I had known at the age of 10. We were all Jehovah's Witnesses. So that means we were the ones that was going from house to house and door to door, knocking on your door, trying to sell the Watchtower and Wake magazine. I was indoctrinated into that religion, and I'll get into the pros and cons of that later. But here was a young boy in the ghetto. The only world we knew was the world of the Jehovah's Witness. The world was coming to an end. There was this whole fight about right and wrong, who God is, all these different things. But the Jehovah's Witnesses weren't allowed to participate in secular activities. We couldn't play on the football team, basketball team, baseball team. We couldn't really get involved in any outside activities. It was go to school, come home, do Bible study, go out in field service, and go to the Kingdom Hall. That was my life. That was my worldview. And I was taught at a young age that the world was going to come to an end in 1977. Now, keep in mind, I was born in 1957. So in 1977, I would have been 20 years old. So my whole young life was this dual reality between trying to be a young boy in the hood, going through puberty and all the things that are associated with that, and still trying to live up to this religious doctrine that I couldn't possibly live up to. I was thinking that, I was going to that I wasn't going to make it, that I wasn't going to be the one that goes to the new world in 1977. So I was like, what is life really for? I'm not going to see adulthood. And really living in the ghetto with the crime and violence and rape and robbery, I didn't think I was going to live to be in my teenage years. But again, it was a weird dichotomy, because my mother, who was totally religious, she told us to lie. My mother never told her children to lie. My mother never lied. But if you were in the projects and you were receiving public aid, welfare, no man was supposed to be in the house. No working age man was supposed to be in the house. So, so in St. Louis, around the country, Black men were leaving the homes so that the women and children could receive, welfare benefits. So my mother told us, if anybody asks you, particularly anybody white, asks you, does your father live in a house? You tell them no. And so we did. And then there was a whole thing about fighting. The first week we moved in there, my brother and I were accosted by a gang, and they, slapped us around a little bit. We lived on the 10th floor of this building. My mother happened to be looking out the window. So we went to the store, came home, my mother was downstairs waiting for us. She said, Danny, my older brother, Junior, that was me, y'all gonna find those boys, you're gonna fight them right now. My mother led us through the hallways, found this group of kids, and told my brother, fight him. If you don't fight him, you gotta fight me. And my brother fought like he never fought before. He was Bruce Lee, Batman, everybody rolled into one. And my mother told me, if anybody jumps in, you jump in. So to wrap it up, my brother won that fight, and we kind of got a reputation of being, fighters. The Brown boys.
Say meet the Browns.
Meet the Browns. You mess with one, you got to mess with all the 7 boys and the 5 girls. So that was our life. We had these rules. You had to watch out for your sister. You had to walk together. You could not let anybody be alone on the elevators, any of that stuff. So this whole world of danger and redemption was what I grew up in. So needless to say, I was a horrible student. I couldn't concentrate. In retrospect, I was just creative. I had this wild imagination, and the teachers couldn't really deal with it because they had like 30, 40 kids in the class, and you can't really focus in on one kid and say, oh, he's artistic, he's creative. If you weren't making the grade, you weren't making the grade. So I had a horrible time in school, failing. So in my sophomore year at Soldan High School, I dropped out of high school. To me, money was the most important thing. So I got myself, I bought myself a 1965 Mustang convertible, got my own apartment at the age of 17, and I was on my own with a paycheck. And again, stop me if I'm rambling.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
So I had this, it was weird because once I found out, once I discovered women, the religion went out the window. And also, at the age of 20, the world didn't come to an end. So I was like, I felt betrayed by this religion. I like, you all don't know anything about more, any more about life than I do. So why am I attending this organization? At the age of 20, I kind of dropped out. I met my first wife, and I got her pregnant, and this religious guilt made me feel like I had to get married. So I got married at 21.
Okay.
Same time, I had went to work at Leclerc Gas Company. It's now called Spire. Right. I got a job at Leclerc Gas Company. And at that time, in the hood, they were hiring because the government was making them hire. It was called affirmative action. They had to hire a number of African Americans. So the word was out in the community that, Leclerc Gas is hiring blacks. I went down, even without a high school diploma, I got a job at Leclerc Gas. Very good, well-paying job, benefits, all that good stuff. So I went to work at Leclerc Gas, and that is where my indoctrination met reality. So I had, we worked the street crews. I was the guy who was digging up holes and laying pipe. And I was with a group of young brothers, and I discovered, weed. And for a guy who had just given up religion, I was out there, man. I was willing to try and experiment with anything. So those were my early 20s, my drug years, just kicking it, man. And unfortunately for my marriage, I was so restricted in life growing up. By the time I got married, I was like out there, not only with the drugs and the partying, that was the disco era. Disco. I was just kicking it, man, to the fullest. And so what happened was that really changed my life. It was really amazing. I look back on it. All this, looking back at my entire life, it's like somebody wrote a script that, this was not happenstance. This was divine intervention. This was the universe walking me through these steps. And I don't discount or take away anything. Everything that happened to me, good and bad, had to happen. And that mantra goes through my whole life, even when I worked at the Post-Dispatch. Anyway, so somehow I had read a book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X. Ran across this book. And again, I was a great reader and writer because of Jehovah's Witnesses. I learned to write, I learned to debate, I learned to research, I learned to talk to crowds as a 10-year-old boy. So I had that skill to read and interpret and write at a very young age. So I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and it totally changed my life. Number one, as a Jehovah's Witnesses, I knew absolutely nothing about my heritage. This program is Black History 365. I want to emphasize the importance of that. I grew up knowing nothing about my heritage. When Martin Luther King was killed in 1968, I was 13, 14 years old. I thought King was the bad guy because I saw the police beating him and the crowds and the protesters. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, the police are the good guys. So these black guys must have did something wrong. And my mother, the religion also taught, they spoke against Black activism, radicalism, militancy. In their mind, God was going to fix everything. So there was no need for Black people to do anything. So I had no idea what this whole Black political movement was about. So I read Malcolm X, and it was the first time I read a book at the age of 21. Read a book where there was a Black protagonist that I could relate to. Malcolm X was raised in poverty. Malcolm X was doing all the wild stuff that I was doing. He was kicking it. He was a pimp. He was a thief. He was all this stuff. But yet he had these redeeming qualities. He went to prison and came out a totally different person. who was dedicated to the liberation of his people. That was like an explosion going off in my mind. And so after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, I started reading everything about Black history, everything about who I was, where I came from, what I was doing, what my people had done from slavery to now. And I fell in love with Black people. That story of who we were and the trials and tribulations we went through and how we came out on top totally changed my whole perspective of who we were.
Well, you know what? I'm just going to interrupt because
Sure.
this leads to a question which you're already talking about with Malcolm X. But this is the question. What Black history pioneer influenced your desires to be a proud Black man? And you're already talking about him, but get a little bit more in depth in how Malcolm took you to another level, because the word comes up to me as balance.
Yeah.
Throughout everything that you've experienced, he's experienced where you see the contrast, and then being able to go to this next level of you all's lives, because that does mirror from what I hear. So could you tell me, was he the most profound pioneer of Black history for you after you read that book? Or was
Yes.
it just, or was he just a platform?
No, he was my personal hero, still is to this day. But he was also the conduit to other Black pioneers, particularly writers. I fell in love with Richard Wright. He wrote Native Son, Black Boy, bunch of books. Fell in love with Richard Wright. He was, I guess, Malcolm was the symbol, but Richard Wright was the actual writer. He was putting things in words that really got to me. And there were other people. There was a guy by the name of John A. Williams. Very few people know him. He wrote a book called The Man Who Cried, I Am. He was another one. James Baldwin. So many other Black writers. Malcolm was
Langston
one.
Hughes. I got to put that one in there.
I got to Langston much later because I really wasn't into poetry and prose. But I got to Langston much later. I was looking at the guys who were writing about real gritty life, being poor, being Black, and how they themselves made that journey to something else. So W.B. Du Bois. I wasn't a fan of Booker T. Washington because I liked Du Bois, and Du Bois kind of painted Booker T. as a sellout, But Booker T's lessons were very important. That Booker T. was saying do for self. But I wasn't a fan of his. Even Martin Luther King, I respected his sacrifice, but I wasn't a fan of his nonviolent approach. I was a fan of Malcolm X's, in your face, you shoot me, I'm shooting your ass back. So I was more drawn to him. Dick Gregory, so many other Black folks, but they put me on this, but particularly the Black writers, they made me want to put things in words. So I was also a cartoonist and artist. I'd done cartoons all my life, even as a kid. I guess that was my way of getting things out. If I had problems at school, I had a whole cartoon series about it. So I was a pretty good artist. So I went to school for fine art, but I switched over to advertising. So I thought commercials. At the time, this was pre-desktop computer, so you had to do stuff by hand, the lettering and the drawing and all that stuff, the ads. So then I was doing an internship with this Black newspaper called Tris. It was a bar and entertainment publication. So I started volunteering time and doing the ads for her. And then she asked me to start doing some interviews, go interview some of the bar owners. So I started doing that. And I got pretty good at, doing articles and stories. I was going to Forest Park Community College at the time. And so I was doing this stuff with her. I was helping design the paper. I was doing interviews. I was delivering the newspaper, doing everything. And I asked her, should I be a partner? She's like, no, you got to have a certain amount of money, like $20,000. I was like, okay. So again, I was going to Forest Park Community College. And I decided to start my own magazine out the blue, no preparation, no research, just I'm going to start my own magazine. So I drew this cardboard mock-up of Take 5 magazine. I went to St. Louis Community College's advertising department, and I was so naive. I was like, if I start this, will you advertise? And she said, yes, we'll do the back page. So it was on, she, Forest Park was my first big advertiser. Take Five was a monthly magazine that I started in 1987,
Mm-hmm.
completely out the blue, Uh, at first, it was an entertainment magazine, but then I met people. There was a guy by the name of Jabari Asim, who is well-renowned, published author now. But Jabari was our editor. He came on as the editor in the early 90s. She became my second wife, but at the time she was just, a young lady with humongous talent. She was an editor. She became my editor. She was a writer. It's really between me and her. Her name was Victoria Anton. So I met this woman who had the same passion for journalism as I did. And we put this magazine out. And a lot of talented people just came and started writing for us. Um, Again, Victoria and I were just, we had a marriage of minds at first. I was still married to my first wife at the time. So me and Victoria became very close, intimate. We were business partners, but we were also, soulmates. So eventually we wound up working together. We had a little office on Washington and Compton Avenue. We lived in that office, and we put Take Five out and Take Five never made money. It was always a struggle. We had to do side jobs on the side to keep it going. We had advertisers like the Black Expo to keep us going.
Mm-hmm.
Our competitor, I thought, was the St. Louis American because they were the largest Black publication in the city. And that small sliver of advertising dollars that white folks give to Blacks was going to them. So my goal at that time was to really challenge the big dog. So I went after the American. I went up to St. Louis Post-Dispatch editorially, out of jealousy and out of ego. I was a young kid. So I did that. But our editorials became the bomb because we fashioned Take Five after Mother Jones in New York, after I don't know, Politico now, but we were doing hard-hitting stories, and we could dedicate like pages to one story. Like we could do 5 pages on one story, and we did political stories, racism stories, the Gregory Bell beating case, the Ellen Reasonover case.
Yeah. Now that's when I really, really got into Take
Yeah,
Five.
yeah.
I
So
really got into you, dig, because you was hitting hard.
we was hitting hard, man. We was hitting hard, and we were in depth, and we started winning awards. And Take Five magazine won at least 35 journalism awards. We'd be in competition with the American, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, or Riverfront Times, and we walked out of that room with more awards than everybody. They may get 1 or 2. We had five or six. So we were journalistically, the people loved us and they supported us. Unfortunately, they didn't support us financially, and it was always a struggle. But they loved us. They loved me. They loved the publication. They loved what we did, and they fought for us. So we ran the publication for 15 years. Finally, and my wife was like, "Hey, listen, it's either you, my second wife, it's either this newspaper or it's us," because we had 2 kids by that time. And she was like, it's either the newspaper or your family. I was like, so uh, it wasn't an easy decision because that was my baby. I created it. Now she was talking about ending it. So on Faith Alone in 2002, I ended the publication. And ironically, at the time, in 2000, in the early 2000s, large newspapers were buying smaller newspapers because the internet was having such an impact on the newspaper industry that newspapers were going out of business across the country. And there was this great panic in the whole newspaper industry. So a lot of them were merging with smaller newspapers. So I had gotten into these conversations with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch through the late Eric Vickers, who was one of my role models. He was
I
an
miss old
attorney.
Eric, man.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
miss
He
him.
did the I-70 shutdown with Al Sharpton. But he was my
Yeah.
man. He was my man. So Eric Vickers and former Mayor Vince Shamel, they were the negotiators with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, who was attempting to buy Take Five magazine. Now, this was like 3 months, and it never really happened because the publisher, Terry Eggers, couldn't see the logic of buying a publication that never made any money. But he loved me. He was a fan of my writing. He was a fan of my style. And he kept saying, you need to work for us. And I'm like, nah, I don't want to work for y'all. I got my own thing. So finally, I ended the publication, I think in 2002. The Black journalist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Greg Freeman, passed away.
Yeah.
So his job was up. And I knew that I didn't qualify. I didn't have a journalism degree. I never worked for a major newspaper. I didn't have that kind of, resume to qualify for that job because people from all over the country were vying for that job as the next columnist for St. Louis Post-Dispatch. So I didn't really think I had a shot. But the publisher said, Sylvester, at the funeral, at Greg's funeral, he said, you need to apply for this job. I was like, okay. So I applied for the job. And what I didn't do, I didn't just apply for the job and go sit down somewhere. I kept sending them sample columns. I sent them a column of what I would write about if I was the columnist in St. Louis Post. I kept sending them that. So it blew me away. They called me in, and the lady said, the HR person said, well, here's the job. Here's how much it pays. Here's the benefits. When can you start? I was like, yesterday. So boom, I went to work for the Post-Dispatch, and it was mind-boggling because here I am, this little guy who had a little newspaper, but now my face is on billboards, my face is on bus stops.
Yeah.
Welcome our new columnist Sylvester Brown Jr. And so it was mind-boggling because now I went from some semi-respected magazine publisher to the second columnist, and me and Bill McCullen, for the largest daily newspaper in the state. So it was mind-boggling. But when they hired me, they said, Sylvester, we want to have this conversation about race. We want to be upfront. We want to be in your face. We want to attack it aggressively. And we think you are the guy who can do it. I'm like, bet, that's who I am. Happy to do it. Unfortunately, the team that hired me, in 2 years, they were gone. And this whole new team came in. And these folks were less journalism oriented than business oriented. So they were talking about editors and all this stuff who were really focused on the bottom line. And what they saw, keep in mind, Fox News started around 1999. So it was having a huge impact on markets all over the country. What newspapers were realizing was, hey, man, there's money in this conservative box. There's money into validating what these conservatives feel and think and want to think. There's money into legitimizing their paranoia. So even liberal newspapers like the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, they started shifting. It started, let's be less liberal, Sylvester, let's not talk about, and me, I was on Mayor Slade's butt, because I thought some of the stuff he was doing with the redistricting, with the taking over the public school district, firing of Sherman George, Fire Chief Sherman George, I was on him. And I was exposing all the hypocrisy and all the nonsense that he was doing. And then I started doing these police cases. A couple of them. One involved a guy who ran over a priest and two nuns and ran away. It was a hit and run. Had this horrible accident, ran over a priest and two nuns, and the police were looking for him. So his lawyer called me, said, Sylvester, you see the guy on the front page of your newspaper? I said, yeah. He's in my office. He wants to turn himself in, but he wants to talk to you first. So called the editors. They said, yeah, go. We'll run it today. Get down there. Went down there, interviewed this guy who was busted up, bleeding, teeth knocked out, because he went through the windshield of the car. He told me the story of what happened. He was, to wrap it up, he was in a car chase. He had just got a rap contract, and these guys were trying to rob him. So he was in this car with bad brakes on a rain-slicked road, went out of control, hit these people, and was devastated by what he was seeing in the news. He just wanted to tell his story. He told me the story. I wrote the story. Turns out his car had bad brakes. Turns out that witnesses saw these guys chasing him. Turns out his story was, legitimate. I wrote that story, and all hell broke loose. I was accused of, trying to defend a murderer because he's Black. I was accused of being a cop hater. There were all kinds of calls and threats for my job. But sorry about that. So anyway, I wrote that story. And the beautiful thing of that, the beautiful end to that story was he went to trial. People who knew the nuns and the priests testified in his defense. They were saying that, the priests and the nun wouldn't want him to be punished. So the judge actually put him on probation, but assigned him to that priest's church. He was going to do his probation at that church. I thought that was the most beautiful example of, humility and charity that I ever seen in my life, and that just blew me away. Another story was, this guy was just executed, Kevin Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Johnson was accused of killing this officer. And in the initial story, they told us how he killed him, shot him point blank, yada, yada, yada. At the very end, they mentioned his brother died, but this is unrelated. I'm like, as a human being, I'm thinking, how the hell could that be unrelated? How could somebody's brother die and you go kill a cop? So I called the reporter, I called the police, and they said, yeah, these two got nothing to do with one another, because the police had gone to this guy's house earlier. So I went to the neighborhood, and I ran into a few young brothers. I told them who I was, while I worked for the Post-Dispatch. They said, we ain't talking to you. I said, why? And they said, because y'all lying. You know the cops killed that boy. I was like, what? There's nothing in our articles about the police even being on the scene of the guy's house. Turns out I went and talked to the family, and they told me this story. Police had come to pick up this kid he had revoked his bond. His truck was parked in front of his house. The aunt and the grandmother lived right next door to each other. He was in the aunt's house with his little brother. He told his little brother, take these keys, run over to grandma's house, give them to grandma, have grandma tell the police that she's driving my truck. Little boy runs over to the house, grandma's house, has a massive heart attack. He had a heart defect. Little kid, like 12 years old, but he had a heart defect. Runs up to the house, has a heart attack, lying on the floor. Grandma runs out to the police. Call 911, call 911. My grandson had a heart attack. She said the police slow walked to the house. She said the police made everybody leave the house, including the niece who was applying CPR, made them all leave and go outside while they searched the house. Did not call 911, did not call for backup until they searched the house. By the time the paramedics got there, the boy was dead. Now, the suspect who shot the officer was next door looking out the window. So when the ambulance left and the police left, he went outside, and his family told him what happened. That's when he accosted that police officer and shot him point blank 4 times. But that didn't come out until I wrote about it. And when I wrote about it, oh man, because I was challenging the narrative of my own newspaper, but it was the truth. The police initially said that this officer never went to the house. When I called the police and said, they described him, because he was almost 7 feet tall. They called him Lurch after the Addams Family character. Mm-hmm. I told them, they described him, and they were like, oh, okay, hold on, we'll get back with you. Came back and said, okay, he was at the house. I'm like, this is such shoddy, poor journalism. I'm a columnist. I'm not a seasoned reporter. Why am I the one that's exposing all these lies and showing motive? Why the young man decided to kill this officer? So again, all hell broke loose. I was the antagonist. I was the guy who was going after cops. I was the guy who was defending a murderer. calls for my resignation. I had to be walked to my car by security because death threats was coming to me. It's one that I never forget. He said, "I will cut your head off and I will urinate in your dead skull." And I thought,
Oh,
oh wow, that's kind of deep.
yeah.
Kind of rude, cut my head off, fine, but you're gonna urinate in my dead skull. Anyway, uh, so anyway, I was becoming that guy who represented Black liberalism at the Post-Dispatch at a time when white conservatism was rising. So they were coming up with all kinds of reasons to try to fire me, all kinds of ways to get rid of me. And they finally came up with something in 2009. I did a story on these three Black ministers from Illinois who were going to Washington, D.C. for a press conference on renewable energy and doing sustainable renewable energy in East St. Louis, where the people would benefit. There'd be economic growth, housing growth, job, all this stuff. I was fascinated by it. And at that time, I was already played with this idea of it, what does independent Black neighborhoods look like? So when I told one of the congressmen involved with that effort of my thoughts, he was like, that's very interesting. You ought to come to the conference. So I'm like, okay, I'll come to the conference. Now, keep in mind, I went to the conference on my own dime, paid for the plane trip, paid for the taxi fare, came right back home. When I got home, the Post-Dispatch found out that I went to the conference, and they were like, oh, this is an ethics violation. So they put me on leave, put me out the building, boxed my stuff up, put me on leave, and they went about the effort of trying to fire me. Now, keep in mind, we had a union, so they had to make up this whole scenario to justify firing me. But I knew where they were going. So what I did was I called my activist friends. I called Earl Wilson, who had the St. Louis Gateway Classic. You probably knew him.
I know Earl.
Yeah. So Earl was like, you can use my place. Come on down. Hold a press conference. So I called my activist friends, Eric Vickers, Percy Green, Jamala Rogers, all my activist friends. And I held a press conference. While they were trying to decide how to announce they were getting ready to fire me, I held a press conference where I resigned. So, and I put it out there. So this is why. Here's my receipts. There were 3 columnists who were suspended at that time. It was me, Bernie Miklasz, and Brian Burwell. Miklasz and Burwell, they had contracts with other news stations. Yet I was the one who was being charged with ethics violation for paying for a trip, going to a trip that I paid for. So I put all that out there. And it was really kind of beautiful because they had no idea. So they're in the newsroom, and all of a sudden I pop up on TV, all the news stations there. Sylvester, and it's still online. Sylvester Brown resigns from the Post-Dispatch. And I called him racist, and I said, I'm not their boy. I quit. And, to this day, I'm very proud of that because I control the narrative. If they had put it out there first that they were firing me for ethics violations, that would have been the story. So I was able to say, I'm quitting because these guys are racist and I ain't playing their game no more. The beauty of it, remember I told you earlier that there's always, it seemed like there was always divine intervention. There was somebody else writing the script. So while they were trying to decide to fire me, I got a call from Tabitha Smiley. And Smiley had called me because I met him, he interviewed me. So I knew him, through media contacts. So I sent him a proposal to write a book. This was around the time of the 40th anniversary of Martin Luther King's death. So I wrote him a proposal. Let's do a book together on this. He's like, great idea, but we don't have time. It takes a year or so to do a book like this. But he didn't forget me. So when the Post-Dispatch was trying to fire me, Tabitha Smiley called and said, hey, Sylvester, I'm looking for a writer, because he had his own book publishing company, Smiley Books. And he had these authors he was working on. He said, I need a writer to help me with some of my authors. And this is how much it pays. And start immediately. Do you know anybody? And I'm like, I know somebody. So as they were trying to decide to fire me, here comes this opportunity to make the same amount of money working for Black people writing books. So that's why I was able to quit that job with confidence because I had a backup plan. So right away I went to work for Tavis Smiley. My first customer was Tom Burrell, who started the Burrell Advertising Agency in Chicago, first Black-owned agency in Chicago. The name of the book was called Brainwash: Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Minds, something like that. But the beauty of it is, with working with Tavis and Tom, I was all of a sudden in New York, Chicago and LA with all the great Black minds. I mean, I met Louis Farrakhan, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, of course, Tom Burrell, just all the great Black minds. In fact, it came to a point where Tavis hosted a seminar in Chicago. I forgot the title of it, but the theme was what Obama is not doing for Black people. And I was so put off by that because I thought, man, it's 2009. Obama's been in office for, he's in his second term, and all the Black leaders are together. This is our moment, our time to come up with a national Black agenda. And yet all they were doing was sitting back blaming Obama for what he wasn't doing. In my mind, like, hold on, you cats been talking about this stuff for 30 years. You do the damn agenda. You put a budget behind it. You go tell the people what this is all about. And I talked to Tavis about it a little bit, but Tavis wasn't hearing it. Tavis saw himself as a spokesman, not as the guy who was going to put all this stuff together and make it happen. But even though he had the resources. So I was so put off by that because I saw Obama doing initiatives, particularly around food production, growing food in the cities and revamping inner cities through growing food. And I saw all that out there, but I saw Black folks knowing nothing about it and Black leaders not even attempting to grasp it and make it out of something real. So it really, really put me off, man, about our Black leadership and about, missing this grand opportunity. So in 2012, I started something called the Sweet Potato Project.
Yeah, I wanted to cut you off.
Okay.
I was getting ready to kind of like weave into that.
Okay, well, that's where we are now.
I had another question I was going to ask you, but I want you to go right into that.
Okay.
And I'm thankful that you picked that up because, talking about food and produce and stuff like that, because not only do you feed the body, is also another side of it is you feeding the mind.
Yeah.
Continue.
Okay, so I come to the conclusion that the only way Black people were going to move forward was to do for self. This was a combination of, Malcolm X, the Nation of Islam, and other Marcus Garvey, Frantz Fanon. It was a combination of all their thoughts. And it was like, okay, the only way we're going to get out of this mess, to stop being victims, is to control our own communities, create our own revenue, create jobs for our kids, educate our kids, control everything. So how can we do that? I thought, okay, here's one avenue. And that avenue is food. Everybody eats. So what if we turn, there were like, what was it, 800 vacant lots in St. Louis City at that time. And I thought, what if we can put these lots in the hands of young people? So anyway, the Sweet Potato Project was designed to teach young kids entrepreneurism in their own communities today. So these were kids who were between the ages of 16 and 20. And we taught them the basics of growing food and turning that food into products. So first, I got about 30 kids, high school kids, and I taught them how to grow food. Then I taught them marketing, branding, sales, had them come up with their own commercials, their own business plans, their own marketing plans. I brought in professionals from the community to teach them, who look like them, to teach them all these aspects. So the whole idea was teaching these kids to be entrepreneurs today in their own neighborhoods. And they didn't have to use sweet potatoes to do many things, but we used sweet potatoes, planted them on vacant lots. We looked to create products. The first product we created was the sweet potato cookie. We had a partnership with St. Louis University. The head cook.
Wait a minute, hold on. A sweet potato cookie?
Sweet potato cookie, yeah. That was the first product we came up with. And
is that still around?
No, no. I'll tell you about how or why I ended the program. But yeah, that's what the first product was. And the kids had so many ideas: sweet potato peanut butter, sweet potato ice cream, so many ideas. I mean, and that was the illumination of the whole program. I saw the genius and the brilliance of our Black kids. We take this stuff for granted that these kids, they come out of impoverished homes, knowing how to be survivors, knowing what colors to wear, knowing how to take their little money and get from point A to point B on bus C and bus C. They know how to hustle, either be it cutting hair, grooming, cutting grass. All our kids need is direction. And unfortunately, all we're doing is allowing this system to send our kids from preschool to prison.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest deficit of African American. We talk about history again. They did a job on us. They did a mental job, a physical job, a historical job on our psyches, where we still think that progress means going to work for some corporation. If you look at other immigrants who come to America, they set up their own social and economic systems within their own communities. Let's just go with the Chinese restaurants. You'll see Chinese folks buying supplies and business from Chinese people or from China. You see their kids working in their stores. Same thing, Jewish people, Italian people, the people from the Middle East. That mantra is always there. They have their own thing. They have their kids into their own thing. Kids may not grow up to even being involved with that, but they learn about business. They learn about marketing. They learn about who their demographic is. We don't do that, We don't have our own thing in our own communities that we control. Anyway, so the idea was to teach our kids entrepreneurship, and they got it. It amazed me how quickly they got it and how good they were at it. I give these kids 3 hours to come up with a product, a marketing plan, and a commercial, and they did it. They did this in 3 hours. They act out the commercial. They put a rap ditty with it. They had they had the product. It wasn't always the greatest product, but they were in the same ballpark, and they did it. So it just emphasized to me the importance of listening to them, providing them direction, and giving them a little something to get excited about that they already know. They know music, they know sales, even though they don't know they know sales. They know what the Black demographic wants. We are the leaders of fashion. We're the leaders of style. We're the leaders of music. We're the leaders of sports, clothing. We know what we want. We're just not producing it. And our kids know what we want. We're just not allowing them to produce it. There is I think we're making some headway in that department. If you look at the whole rap genre and all that sort of thing, but we're not there yet. And but again, what's so inspiring to me was just the mere fact of engaging with these kids. We had a summer program, 4 days out of the week. I paid them a bi-weekly salary. Every 2 weeks, they got a paycheck. And that was the rules, If you want to get paid, you got to do what I say. And they did it. For the most part. There were a couple of rockheads, but comes with the territory. But
let me ask you this question. I had to cut because I'm enjoying that, but now with some of those guys, I have to ask this question. And like I tell people, 45, 50 minutes go by so fast when you have a very engaging guest. And let me ask this question. It's going to probably end up being our last question. Then we're going to get all your platforms.
Okay.
This leads to this question because you're speaking about the Sweet Potato Project. What's your thoughts on our young Black writers today? And let me tell you, give me probably about 3 minutes of that, and then give me your platforms, and then we're going to wrap it up. But I want to hear what you think about today's young Black writers.
Yeah. The historical truth is that our creativity is boundless, limitless. You see that in spoken word, you see that in poetry, you see that in music, you see that in hip hop. We are doing some amazing stuff. I mean, the stuff that The Weeknd is doing, that, some of these artists are doing, is really amazing. And it's really a follow through of history. But that's where we're seeing their literary genius. I personally encourage all kids to write. When I had the Sweet Potato Project, that was our goal. You had to look at the news, tell me something about the news, and then write about it. The importance of writing is sharing information, getting it out of you and getting it on paper. You may never become a professional writer, but you're learning how to communicate. And that's the importance of writing, learning how to communicate. To me, it's still a blessing that I can communicate with strangers through written word. So I think our kids are brilliant. I think they can be brilliant writers, brilliant musicians, brilliant anything, if we give them the platforms to do it and the direction. Don't just say, go out there and do this. Show them how to do it. Walk them through the steps of greatness, and they will do it. They will grasp it. They will, the same passion that many of them put into crime can be put into something positive. We just have to show them how to freaking do it.
Say that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, but.
Well, let me ask one more question real quick.
Sure.
Before you give me your platforms and we wrap it up. What do you see yourself in the next 3 years with your work?
Okay. I am writing for the St. Louis American now. That gig allows me to interview people and learn more about individuals and what makes people tick. My old man desire is to, in my chapters, in my journey, writing books, particularly books of fiction. I have 3 books now. One is about the Sweet Potato Project, When We Listen. Another one is a compilation of my short stories called White Castles with Jesus at the Used Tire Shop. And my last is a novel called Gateway Gas. I'm working on a follow-up to Gateway Gas now. But yeah, I want to spend the rest of my life writing, because I feel this burning need to pass this stuff on. My story, as pedestrian as it is, as unique as it is, as circumspect as it is really kind of pedestrian. There's nothing special about me except for the fact that I recognize that I'm here for a reason, and I've found a way to express myself through writing. I think that story needs to be told. I think it needs to be heard by a lot of our young people. Just as Malcolm X inspired me, I want to inspire another young Black boy or girl to understand that they were born here ready, that they have all the talents and skills prepackaged in them. And being poor, being impoverished, being under, hard situations only makes them better. Only makes them better prepared to seize opportunity, to do that strange, unique thing that makes you, special. So I have this burning desire just to pass on all this stuff that I've been through and that I know, because again, I ain't special. I'm just a kid who found God, who found, this thing between good and evil and right and wrong at a young age, and was able to transpose all that into his life. I'm still that Jehovah's Witness kid when I write about issues. I'm still that guy who likes to talk, who learned to talk to crowds at a young age as an old man. So there's nothing special about me, but there's something that we all share. The universe, God, whatever you want to call it, recognizes you and has given you all the tools you need to be what you need to be. You just need to grasp it.
So. There you go. There you go. See, this is what I'm talking about with digesting Black History 365.
Yeah.
A lot of things get said, a lot of questions get asked, but the main thing is that how you are presenting yourself, because it is a vast amount of people that's behind us that need us.
Yeah.
It needs to see where we will take them if they let us lead them the right way.
Right.
But we have to be positive leaders. That's the number one thing that's centered around digesting Black History 365, the positiveness that we convey in each other, because, we got something to share if somebody's willing to receive. So could you let us know about your platforms, all the social media that you may be on, and any way that we can connect so we can get your books?
Yeah, the best way is to Google me, Sylvester Brown Jr., writer, and you will get my website. I don't have it in front of me, but if you Google any one of my books, White Castles with Jesus at the used, I'm sorry, White Castles with Jesus and Uncle Ray at the used tire shop. Google that, and it'll take you to Amazon and also my website. Uh, uh, St. Louis American, I'm at St. Louis American. Just Google my name, you'll find me. And hopefully
The
we'll
one
kind
thing
of,
you don't have to worry about, because my videographer, he'll make sure that we have all that in the subscription box,
okay, that's what I'm talking
and
about. Yeah,
everything, so they'll
yeah,
be able to see all that, because we're gonna definitely keep on promoting it
yeah.
and getting you out here. But let me backtrack and say this:
Uh-huh.
you are special. I don't bring nobody on here that don't have a growth, or should I say, a grip on the people who they already have touched and the people they will be touching tomorrow. Because they're, like you said, working with these young kids, giving them the appetite to want to be exposed and do all these different things that they are capable of doing. Like, say, you started with a sweet potato,
Yeah, yeah,
and the sweet potato just took it to a whole nother level. It
yes,
put me in the mindset of George Washington Carver.
yes, yes.
When you spoke about the sweet potato and the
Right. He
peanut.
had 100 patents on sweet
Yeah,
potato alone, you know?
man, peanut,
You're right,
sweet potato. I mean,
right.
and it
Yeah.
was so funny because when I started really looking into Black history, the positive Black historians that I can really like put out there and say how many patents he had on sweet potato,
I know, right? Yeah.
shoe
Imagine,
polish, peanut
right,
butter, but shoe polish.
right.
And, and,
Imagine,
and, and some amazing products.
right.
Some
And
amazing
it's
products.
still going on today, man. We did a story in American about a lady who was making hair weave out of banana peels. So that creativity is still in us. We still look for a way to make the impossible happen. We
Yeah.
just don't get validated. We just don't have anybody to turn the ideal into action. And that's the piece that's missing. But again, I find hope in the hip hop community because not only are they making music, now they're talking about owning their label, which Prince really was a leader in that. They're talking about owning their label, talking about Black lawyers and Black PR agencies and Black. So hip hop to me is the key. We put it down, but these young Black brothers and sisters are really creating a genre. If only they would do what T.I. does, what Queen Latifah does, what who's some of the others, Akon. If they start doing what they do, which is talking
Yep.
about buying back their community, creating cities. If those Black rappers start to do it with a purpose and find a way to fund it around the country, and then making the government fund, you talk about reparations, put money into a Black take back the block movement, man, we'd be so damn powerful. We could not be stopped. But
Right.
I think it's starting. Even crazy Kanye, he's speaking a
Oh,
little
yeah.
bit. Even crazy Kanye is speaking a little bit of truth because he, in the bottom line, he's talking about ownership. That
Right.
whole tennis shoe deal that they said he lost. No, he didn't. He wound up getting back with them and making more money because of that. But that's the key. You know, how do we control our own narrative?
Yeah, we control our own narrative.
Yeah.
But look, we're gonna wrap it up. But I'm gonna tell you, this has been fantastic. Where did 50 minutes go? I
No.
mean, I don't even like to even talk about how long it took. I just like to go into the flow because I like to talk about being organic and kind of
Yeah.
let everything, happen.
Yeah.
Digesting Black History 365 is your history. Our
Yeah.
history is
Yeah.
beautiful history. And when I bring people on like Mr. Sylvester Brown, like I told you, get your notebook out. Get your notebook out. But we will be bringing you back on. So will you please grace us again with a part two?
Most of it, man, it's been a pleasure walking down this path. I'm always learning even more about myself as I talk about myself. But yeah, anytime.
All right, well, that's great. Well, once again, please like, share, and subscribe to Digesting Black History 365 on my channel, my YouTube channel. So that's come on out here. Once again, our history, Black history, is the world's history. So love it, take it in, embrace it. Be able to do some things like what Mr. Brown was saying, like for us, like being a participant in the kitchen. Because think about it, if you start with a sweet potato, Then next thing you know, man, you're a photographer, you're a
Right.
lawyer, you're a doctor, you're a dentist. I mean, there's
Right.
all the many things that they, and definitely proprietor.
Right.
Because remember, he started Take Five with a little bit of nothing, with just
Right.
ingenuity and talent and determination. And then the number one word, he was being intentional, where he was ready to make that move to get that magazine out there. Because I still review that magazine. I want to get some old copies. I want to hold one up like this. So you gotta either mail me one, or next time we get together, I want you to give me one of them old copies, because I
There's a
love
Take
the
Five
history.
website.
I love Take Five.
Yeah,
And
I'll send you a link, but this got copies and some stories on there. So
okay,
I'll
good
send that
deal,
to
good
you.
deal. Well, once again, we out of here, and thank you to all my viewers. So, like I said, once again, like, share, and subscribe, and just let everybody know that we are here and we're trying to continue to give love to our Black history. So, once again, we're out of here. Be blessed, be better, be safe, and be proven. Period. Till next time. Thank you again, Mr. Brown. God bless you.
Thank you. Peace.
All right.